Hey friends, so for this video I want to talk about narrow utilitarianism. Now, utilitarianism is, the general idea that you should do whatever, kind of maximizes utility, right? What is utility? It's that I think different people have different interpretations. It's like what feels good to most people, or so you can give some sort of simplistic thought experiments where the answer is pretty clear cut, which is like, oh, if I have like 5 friends and I can do one thing that makes all 5 friends happy, or I can do one thing that makes only one person happy and 4 other people unhappy, I should pick the thing that makes 5 people happy, because then I have made more people happy than if I had not. But then you can start to tweak it and be like, oh, but what if the thing that makes the people happy in the short run is actually kind of unsatisfying, or in the long run, or maybe it's damaging, maybe it's like drugs, right? And then they become addicts, and then their lives end up being miserable. Whereas the thing that makes the 4 people unhappy, maybe it's like a temporary unhappiness, but in the long run it makes them more self-sufficient, more confident, more effective. Then you could argue that, oh, okay, the drugs in the short run, it's a peak of utility a little bit, and then after that diminishing utility all the way. Whereas the other thing is like a little bit of unpleasantness, and then in the long run it's way more utility. So the pleasing, kind of picking the less palatable option is actually the more utilitarian one, because in the long run that maximizes utility. You get that? So now there's a whole bunch of different ways you can talk about it, and it becomes a framing game, right? How do you frame and define what utility is? And there's all these funny, weird experiments, like, what if I don't really care about my life and somebody would experience tremendous amount of pleasure from killing me, or from killing a person who is suicidal, maybe? And then you can be, is that utilitarian? And then you might start to argue, oh no, it's, if you look at it from the frame of all of society, right? While that one person might get a lot of pleasure from killing the other person who consents because they don't really care about life, the rest of us experience disutility because that violation is, it violates the social contract or whatever. It makes us all feel bad. And you see how you can kind of go back and forth with this over and over again, and rearrange the frame in a way that is either palatable or beneficial or whatever it is. And broadly, I do feel that I'm speaking about this from experience based on what people have talked to me about, and I have encountered a continuous stream. It's not endless, like it's like maybe every couple of weeks or something, somebody reaches out to me and DMs me to just say that, yeah, I'm kind of depressed, I'm kind of bored, I'm kind of just, my life just feels shitty, like help me out. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on, what do you want to do, blah blah blah. And then they say things like, well, I'm working at this thing and I should be doing that because I should be reading more books, I should be taking more notes, I should be working on myself. And I'm like, okay, stop. Why are you saying should? Why should? And then they're like, oh, because it's the right thing to do, it's the good use of my talents, it's beneficial. I'm like, no, fuck you. Why are you saying should? And clearly there's no light in your eyes. You're not happy, you're not lively, you're not having fun. You're just kind of, there's this sense of tedious obligation to what you're talking about, and it's deaf. It's like, it's just dreary and sad. Like, why are you obliged to save the world or to do some dramatic thing? And then they're like, oh, no. And what I feel is that they've basically kind of been semi-indoctrinated. I don't know if that's too strong a word, but they've been led to believe that just that life is this place where you have to do what you're obliged to do. You're obliged to do the right thing. And I don't like that. I don't think that's a way to live. I don't think that, I feel that the best thing you can do, and I may have talked about this in another video, but fuck it, I'm talking about it again, is come alive, right? And I always like to talk about Richard Feynman and Steve Jobs and a bunch of other people. So Feynman was working in physics, and he was bored at some point, right? And he was just not making progress on his problems, and he was just dreary and I was going to say sian, which is like a Singaporean, like Malay. It's like kind of just bummed out. And then one day he was in a cafeteria and somebody was spinning a tray, and he was just watching the guy spin the tray. And it's like, oh, it's interesting. It seems like the outer part of the tray spins faster than the inner part, something like that. It was just a curious observation. And then he just was curious about the physics of it, and he started to diagram it and figure it out. And then he made some progress on figuring out what's going on, and he shared it with his colleagues, I think. And someone said, oh, that's very interesting, Feynman. What's the point of that? And Feynman's like, oh, there's no point at all. I'm just having fun. I'm trying to figure stuff out. I'm just having fun. And the piddling with plates that he called it, that went on to win the Nobel Prize for what he did in physics. And the thing is, the important thing is, it like the moral of the story isn't you will win the prize if you have fun. The prize is the fun. The additional prize at the end is whatever, is icing on the cake, is extra gravy, whatever. The point is, he was depressed or dreary or bummed out, and then he chose to have fun. And then it turns out that people having fun, pursuing what is interesting, there's this like something magical at the end of that. Now, for the Steve Jobs story, you know, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, when they were young, they were pranksters. They were fooling around, they were screwing, they were constantly doing pranks and like practical jokes and stuff. And one of the early things they did was they came out with blue boxes. And blue boxes was a way of like freaking telephone systems. It's a kind of hack. Like it uses the digital sound. I don't know what exactly it does, but it mimics the thing that the way telephone networks used to work. Again, I don't know the specifics, but they managed to basically hijack telephone infrastructure to make like global international calls and stuff. And I think they tried to prank call the Pope, and like someone from the Vatican picked up and they're like, oh, you know, who's this, and so on. And Steve Jobs goes on to say, if it weren't for blue boxes, there wouldn't be Apple, because it was that experience of hijacking telephone infrastructure, which is illegal, by the way. So there is something to be said about like privilege and fucking around and so on. But yeah, you know, they were doing something kind of criminal, kind of illegal. But what they did gave them the confidence and the know-how and the understanding to realize that it changed their relationship with billion-dollar infrastructure. And it gave them the conviction to believe that they could by themselves, make hardware that would be used by millions of people, billions of people, right? And the thing is, Steve Jobs wasn't trying to change the world when he was a teenager. He was fucking around, right? And he was having fun. And I'm trying to say, so, and you know, people always say things like, oh, what does the world need? You know, did the world need Feynman to be spinning his trays, to be analyzing spinning trays? Did the world need a couple of prank nerds goofing off and screwing around with telephone infrastructure? The world doesn't know what it needs, you know, because we can't predict where tremendous utility is going to come from. You know, when electricity was invented, people were like, what's the use of it? And they're like, and the person who came up with it was like, what's the use of a newborn baby? You know, we don't know what it's going to do. Like, it's fun, it's interesting, we're screwing around and finding out. And I would say that, you know, tremendous value in the world is created downstream of heart eyes, you know, the emoji with the heart eyes. And like, you have to be in love with what you do. And you know, I can imagine someone watching this and then like adding I need to love what I do to like the set of tedious obligations that they have. And like, no, you know, disregard your tedious obligation. And again, like now when I say that, I can think of the other extreme where someone's like, oh, you know, fuck my responsibilities, you know, like screw my family or my friends or whatever. I don't need to care about responsibilities. I'll just do whatever I want. And you know, historically, people have done that. Like the Buddha, he like abandoned his family to do his thing. And like, was that the right thing to do? You know, from a lot of people's perspectives, he served the world, but from a very real perspective, he abandoned his family and he had to live with that, however he did, I don't know. And you know, there's one of the Sony co-founders, he abandoned his family's like 14th or 16th generation sake business. Like that had been like for many years, like from father to son or uncle to nephew or whatever, they had been maintaining that sake business, and he abandoned it. So he kind of betrayed his family. But in doing that, he found a way to serve the whole world. And you know, Steve Jobs ended up saying, the point of Apple is to be the Sony of the computer business, right? And you know, so it's hard to say, who's to say, right? And so that's my criticism of narrow utilitarianism. I mean, if you're like an enlightened utilitarian, you probably already realized that, well, there's unknown utility in like surprises, and we should be experimenting and having fun. But I want to caution people who kind of get swept up in this sense of tedious obligation. Don't do that. Like, have fun. You have a solemn obligation and duty to have fun. All right, done.